To Ari Fleischer and Capri Cafaro, good to have you on the couch. Katie as well.
Yeah.
Few seconds left here. The pool's just called into the Oval Office. A huge day. The president's called off this upcoming summit with North Korea. What do you expect from the president?
I don't think he likes the press, so he's very camera shy. Don't know what the topic is. We'll see.
Yeah, we will see. All right, thanks to everybody for joining us on the couch.
We
will have more Outnumbered for you tomorrow. And here's Harris.
So we are watching that situation in the Oval Office where the White House press pool has been pulled in. And as that comes together, we will bring it to you live. The summit with North Korea, meanwhile, is off. The president had his first words on that just last hour. Perhaps he'll speak again. We do not know. But for now, we're going outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. President Trump canceled the highly anticipated sit down with North Korea's Kim Jong-un, citing, quote, tremendous anger and open hostility from the North. The president addressed his decision at the White House just a short while ago, issuing a warning to North Korea.
I believe that this is a tremendous setback for North Korea and indeed a setback for the world. I've spoken to General Mattis and the Joint Chiefs of Staff and our military, which is by far the most powerful anywhere in the world, that has been greatly enhanced recently, as you all know, is ready if necessary.
But at a hearing on Capitol Hill, where Secretary of State Mike Pompeo testified, the top Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Bob Menendez, took a jab at the administration.
The art of diplomacy is a lot harder than the art of the deal. And the reality is that when you talk about a Libyan model, I don't know what type of messages you're sending at the end of the day. It didn't work too well for Gaddafi.
Let's get to Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts. So, John, there are a couple of things happening. We can talk about that, but also the president has just called in some of the press pool into the Oval Office.
Yeah, and we were joking with each other when we got this call for an event that was supposed to be closed. Oh, summit's back on, but that's not what it's about. The president is going to be announcing the pardon of famous boxer Jack Johnson. Also in attendance will be Sylvester Stallone, Deontay Wilder, the Bronze Bomber, Lennox Lewis, maybe some other heavyweight champions there as well. So nothing to do with North Korea, but an interesting event at the White House that we'll see on television very shortly. Now, as to what's going on with North Korea, I mean, this is a page right out of the president's book, The Art of the Deal, and certainly the president making good on a pledge that he made ahead of this summit with North Korea, or at least the planned summit, that if he didn't think that it was going to bear fruit, he would walk away from it. Listen to what the president said in the Roosevelt Room just a short time ago.
I've decided to terminate the planned summit in Singapore on June 12th. Hopefully, positive things will be taking place with respect to the future of North Korea. But if they don't, we are more ready than we have ever been before.
The president took action, sending a letter canceling the summit to Kim Jong-un after one of Kim's closest advisors, Cho Sun-hui, threatened a nuclear confrontation with the United States if diplomacy failed. She also called Vice President Mike Pence, quote, stupid and politically dumb, but White House officials tell Fox News that the threat was at the center of the president's decision to cancel the summit. The president today sending a warning to Kim that the U.S. is prepared in the event that North Korea makes good on its nuclear threat, and that South Korea and Japan are fully on board with that. Listen here.
I have spoken to South Korea and Japan, and they are not only ready should foolish or reckless acts be taken by North Korea, but they are willing to shoulder much of the cost of any financial burden, any of the costs associated by the United States in operations if such an unfortunate situation is forced upon us.
The president playing both bad cop and good cop today. At the same time, he was reminding Kim that the U.S. can level his country if Kim decides that he wants a nuclear confrontation. The president was also flattering to Kim Jong-un, writing in the letter, quote, "I felt a wonderful dialogue was building up between you and me, and ultimately it's only that dialogue that matters. Someday I look very much forward to meeting you. In the meantime, I want to thank you for the release of the hostages who are now home with their families. That was a beautiful gesture and was very much appreciated." The president also giving Kim a chance to put the summit back on track, writing, quote, "If you change your mind having to do with this most important summit, please do not hesitate to call me or write. The world, and North Korea in particular, has lost a great opportunity for lasting peace and great prosperity and wealth. This missed opportunity is a truly sad moment in history." The president said, Harris, that he had been having a good dialogue with Kim Jong-un right up until recently. When he was asked in the Roosevelt Room what changed, the president said, "Well, I'm not going to talk about that." But he did say earlier in the week that he pegged the change in North Korea's attitude to a second meeting that Kim Jong-un held with Chinese President Xi Jinping. That was on May 8th in Dalian in China. So the president suggesting earlier this week, it was on Tuesday in the Oval Office, he wasn't particularly happy about that. And I think this letter is a less than subtle suggestion to Kim Jong-un that he shouldn't listen so much to Xi Jinping and that he should keep the summit on track. There's still a long time politically between now and June 12th, so who knows what will happen.
That's an interesting thing. You know, we had Ari Fleischer on, former White House press secretary himself under a different president, just on Outnumbered, and he said, yeah, you know, this is part of deal making.
Recollections of that.
Yeah, so it's interesting that it's part of the deal making. Who knows what comes next? John Roberts, and thanks for the notes, by the way, on what's happening in the Oval Office as the press pool gathers.
You bet. I mean, this letter to Kim is absolutely a negotiating tactic. There's no question about that.
John Roberts, thank you.
Thanks.
Let's meet my first guest, who says President Trump made the right decision in canceling the summit. Republican Senator Cory Gardner serves on the Foreign Relations Committee, where Secretary Pompeo just testified this morning. This announcement coming, the president has spoken already, and you say it's a good thing. Why?
Well, it is. Look, I think the president made it clear all along that if the summit was not going to be about denuclearization, then he would walk away. He said he was willing to stay there as long as it took to make a deal. But at the same time, if it wasn't going to be about our goal, denuclearization, it shouldn't happen. And I think what we've seen in the last several weeks is a change in tone, a change in direction from North Korea. We've heard it through their spokesman. We've heard it through Kim Jong-un. And I think that's the right decision to make. The president was clear. He wants this to happen, but not until it's ready, not until Kim Jong-un is ready to actually talk about getting rid of his nuclear program.
Senator, what do you make of the president saying, well, he doesn't want to talk in detail, but something changed with North Korea?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I've met with, as you said, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo this morning and just left the White House to visit, from a visit with Ambassador Bolton. I think there's a couple things that we can try to figure out here. One, Kim Jong-un may be getting burned or at least challenged within the internal works of his government. Some of the old guard generals, are they liking the direction that's taken place? Or perhaps Kim Jong-un is himself trying to determine a better negotiating posture. Maybe he thought by rattling the saber a little bit more, he'd give himself more negotiating tools and ability for the summit on the 12th. But clearly what happened is they've walked away. They were not returning phone calls. They didn't show up at a meeting in Singapore. They've not responded to South Korean overtures recently. And so I think what this means is Kim Jong-un simply isn't ready. You know, he's torn. He's torn between two things. He has the ability to achieve a lasting historic peace, but he also is this master propagandist that I've talked about with you before. And I think today the propaganda won out over in you know, his internal debate over peace.
Yeah, you know, the people that you feel so bad for, though, are the ones that the president seemed to almost speak to directly earlier this week when he called them hard-working people of North Korea.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're in North Korea and you look down or have the ability to see what's happening in the South, you know, it wasn't just a few decades ago, a little bit more than that, South Korea was further behind North Korea economically. That is dramatically different today. And so if you're a North Korean looking at the opportunities, the prosperity that South has, you've got to think what a better life we could lead. Kim Jong-un is holding that back. He's preventing that from happening. If there was peace on the peninsula, North Korea could be welcomed back to the responsible nations of the world. They have to address their human rights violations. There's a number of things they have to address, but they could too become a prosperous nation if they would just back away from the hostility and provocations of today.
You know, I know the president said that North Korea missed out on a great deal. I'm wondering where this leaves us, because they are unpredictable. They do like to fire and launch missiles and do all sorts of things, and we've gotten kind of a peek now at who they can be. They let Americans go, but that's not who they really have been, because they've tortured a whole lot of people. So where does that leave us? Is war on the table? That's what the American people had been told by Democrats, particularly. You had two options here. The other was war. Is that the case?
Well, the Democrats' approach to North Korea has quietly created a lot of whiplash. I mean, a year ago, they were mad at the president for being too harsh. Now they're mad at the president for walking away from the meeting. Before, they were mad at him for having the meeting in the first place. So I don't think they have a credible response to the president when it comes to North Korea at this point. They've simply been wrong. What we have to do is work for peace on the peninsula. And I think that's what this is about, giving us time to refocus the North, refocus Kim Jong-un and his efforts to truly bring denuclearization. What does this mean for us? It means an opportunity for more diplomacy. It means a doubling down on maximum pressure, passage of legislation like mine, the LEAD Act, which would create a full economic embargo of North Korea. It's time that we do that. Let's cut them off economically and diplomatically entirely so that they feel that pressure. There are more tools we have in the diplomatic toolbox, and we ought to use every single one of them.
All right. Senator Cory Gardner of the great state of Colorado on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I have a flip now. I'm going to bring in a guest who you see from across the aisle on that same committee. I certainly appreciate you teeing it off with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about the Democrats and kind of some of their response. In the House in particular, Leader Nancy Pelosi of the Democrats is mocking the president, suggesting that North Korea is the big winner in all of this. Watch.
I think it's a good thing for Kim Jong-un. Here you had a thug, a person who killed all his own family members, a person who runs a police state, being legitimized by the President of the United States. They were on a par with each other. He got global recognition and regard. He's the big winner. And when he got this letter from the president saying, okay, never mind, he must be having a giggle fit right there now in North Korea, in Pyongyang.
Wow. Let's bring in another member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. As I mentioned, Democrat Ben Cardin, we love to have on the program, of the great state of Maryland. When you hear Nancy Pelosi, does that tone speak for Democrats like yourself?
Well, I just got on air, so I didn't hear exactly what she said. But I can tell you this. We want diplomacy to succeed. We understand that President Trump has a different way of conducting foreign policy. I don't agree with his style, but at the end of the day, we all want diplomacy to work.
Yeah. Well, just to step back, because this is making news now, and she's a top Democrat in the House, and she's saying that Kim Jong-un must be having a giggle fit over the fact that this didn't work out. I mean, that's a tough tone.
Well, look, the perpetrator of the crisis is Kim Jong-un in North Korea. They're the ones violating international norms. We recognize that the successful path is through diplomacy. We must make diplomacy work. I think President Trump at times has made the temperature too high, where he should have used more diplomacy. So I don't necessarily agree with the style that he's using. My guess is today's letter of withdrawal is a strategy in negotiations, not one that I would have used. So I'm focused on getting us back on path for a successful diplomatic solution, which means removing the nuclear weapons from the Korean Peninsula.
The Representative Pelosi was criticizing the letter that President Trump wrote after this, which seemed to, he thanked the release of the American hostages. It seems to be kind of in that diplomatic tone. I want to get your idea of what it takes to go forward with North Korea at this point, because the deal making is not necessarily over, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. I think it's very clear. We had Secretary Pompeo before us just today. And clearly, I think everyone recognizes in the administration that diplomacy is the path that we must pursue. So, no, we need to make sure that we keep those lines open.
The president alluded to, but he didn't exactly say. So earlier this week, Senator, the president said, I don't like it, the way that North Korea behaves after they have a meeting with China's leadership. And then today, he wouldn't say exactly what had changed with North Korea, but something had changed. On your committee, you study these things. What is going on with North Korea and China?
Well, clearly we depend upon China enforcing the sanctions in order to get North Korea's attention. And clearly we have to work very closely with China to make sure those sanctions are enforced. That question was asked during today's hearing, and Secretary Pompeo said that those sanctions are being adhered to by China. So the pressure still remains.
Senator, before I let you go, we have been going back and forth with our country and China about tariffs and trade. I mean, do we still have those tough conversations with China now that North Korea potentially is not forefront in the conversation?
Well, this is part of the reality of today's diplomacy. You're going to have differences with countries, but you have to engage them. We need China in regards to North Korea. We have a common agenda with China and North Korea. China doesn't want a nuclear Korean peninsula, and we've made it clear that we're not supporting regime change. I think that gives some comfort to China. So we will disagree on trade. We will disagree on a lot of other issues. We'll disagree on what they're doing on the China seas, and we're going to try to find solutions to all those issues.
Senator Cory Gardner of Colorado was on just seconds before you joined us, Senator Cardin, and he said, look, across the aisle, as we look at Democrats, they view things very differently than Republicans. Is there kind of a divide, or do you not see it that way? I mean, I would hope that we would agree on a madman with nuclear capability, but the way you get there, I keep hearing you use the word diplomacy. Do you see it differently than the Republicans?
On North Korea, I don't think there is much of a difference. We passed a strong sanction bill last year against North Korea, strongly bipartisan. I've joined with Republican colleagues on North Korea bills. We recognize that we have to keep the pressure at the highest point on sanctions if we're going to get North Korea's attention, and we work to have other countries adhere to that. So I think the difference clearly is that we disagree with President Trump's manner of presenting these issues. We think the language that he used early in his discussions with Kim Jong-un was not helpful. So we may disagree on the manner in which the president is proceeding, but the objective is the same. We want a non-nuclear Korean peninsula. Kim Jong-un not only is violating international norms on his nuclear program, look what he's doing to his own people on human rights violations, one of the worst countries in the world. We want action.
Well, as you pointed out, across the chambers there in the House, Nancy Pelosi was focused on the president rather than a dictator who kills his people and tortures them. But from what you're telling me, some Democrats on the Hill, like yourself, are totally focused on how to deal with that nuclear threat from that dictator. It's great to have you on the program today, as always, Senator.
Thank you.
All right, we want to take you someplace very special now. We had mentioned that the Oval Office, the president had called a press pool, and we want to tell you what's going on there. The president is pardoning posthumously legendary boxer Jack Johnson. And what he's doing with this is at the behest of Sylvester Stallone, the actor, who on his own social media moments ago had said, I'm in the Oval Office with the president, watch this. So we are showing you this, the president with this pardon. And so that you know, Jack Johnson, just so in case you don't know the history, back at a time when this country was divided racially and in a very marked fashion, this boxer was accused of taking a white woman across state lines. And so what the president is saying is you were pardoned of that. He since has passed, of course. That's why it's posthumous, this pardon. But wanted to show you the president, the first black heavyweight boxer in the United States. And you see the belt there on the table, that championship belt of Jack Johnson inside the White House. This is the Oval Office. Briefing key lawmakers on an FBI informant who met with Trump campaign officials. House GOP Committee Chairman Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy among those sitting down with officials in the first meeting. That was just a short time ago. But House Intel Committee ranking Democrat Adam Schiff, who's also among those attending, went after House GOP officials' push for more details on that FBI informant.
It is, fairly breathtaking that in the face of the department and the FBI saying that lives could be risked here, that the president and these Republican members are saying, we don't care. We want access to the information.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill with more on this. Mike, 2 meetings.
That's right, Harrison. One meeting at the Department of Justice just wrapped up a few moments ago. That sets the stage for a larger group meeting here on Capitol Hill next hour. The first meeting featuring House Speaker Paul Ryan and House Republican Chairman Devin Nunes and Trey Gowdy, and also the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. It was initially just a meeting for Nunes and Gowdy, but the Speaker had a scheduling conflict later in the day, and House Democratic Leader Nancy Pelosi says she sent Adam Schiff to make sure Democrats were getting the same information as the GOP leaders. Pelosi suggested these meetings aren't about justice, they're about helping President Trump.
I don't think this meeting should be taking place, period. What is the purpose of it? It appears that it's a meeting that could be sharing information that somebody's interpretation of could possibly be helpful to the president's defense. I've objected to the meeting, period. So it's not just that it wasn't bipartisan.
Then there's the meeting, the top of next hour on Capitol Hill, for the top 4 leaders of Congress and the top Republicans and Democrats on the intelligence committees. We expect Oversight Chairman Trey Gowdy to be there in Speaker Ryan's place. One senator who wanted to be there, South Carolina's Lindsey Graham, talked about his hopes for this meeting, saying, quote, "I would like to know about if there was a confidential informant used to surveil a nominee of a political party. There may have been a good reason, but that's pretty unusual to have an investigation of a nominee of a political party during political season. You need to make sure there are checks and balances. And did it happen? And was there a good reason?" This has been a rapidly evolving situation. Again, it was supposed to be Republican meetings at first. Then it was quickly made bipartisan to try to squeeze some of the politics out of these meetings. Harris?
Mike Emanuel, thank you very much. Can you squeeze politics out? It's a question. Oklahoma Congressman Steve Russell, a Republican on the House Oversight Committee. Great to see you today. I see you cracking a smile because I think you heard what I just said. How do you squeeze out politics? What do you expect to come out of these meetings?
Well, the last time you had a bipartisan meeting related to these issues, it actually was favorable, and the people that came away from that meeting said it was productive. That's the hope here as well. It is good that you have both parties that are going into the meeting. But we all ought to be concerned if we have an FBI informant involved in a political campaign. That's our duty on the Oversight and Government Reform Committee to ask those questions, and we'll see what comes out of today's meeting.
Are we clear yet on why we're just now learning about this? I mean, it's not like it's just happened.
Well, you see the FBI's concern in this case that, they're worried about sources, methods, different things, and we appreciate that and understand that. Then the guarded nature and the swirling around, as you framed up earlier, about the political side of it. There's obviously a lot of information that people inside and outside are trying to hide, but that is really irrelevant. Congress has a duty since 1814 with the Oversight and Government Reform Committee to properly hold government accountable and to ask the questions. As we draw our power from the consent of the people, they deserve to know those answers.
Congressman Russell, as you look at what the president has said about this, if this person were put in place as an informant with his former campaign and there was any politics involved, that it could potentially be illegal. Now, Democrats push back and say, no, it had to do with the Russia investigation and potential collusion. Where are the facts?
Well, that's what we hope to get to. And I think that really the American public is really suspect of all of it. When we see the back and the forth and all of that, the Justice Department, certainly the FBI, held a great reputation for many, many decades. That's not to say that they haven't had flaws in the past, but when powers potentially could be abused, it is up to the oversight arm of Congress to look at the legislative side and then to look, are there abuses in power in the Justice Department? We need those answers, and if the answers come out clean, then great, we know. If not, then we need to go to town.
Congressman, what kind of laws are in place to keep this from turning political? Because it seems like it's almost impossible.
Well, you certainly will have different views. You will have those that will look at the idea that, okay, Mr. Trump obviously has done something wrong, they think, and that he has colluded with the Russians, although there's no evidence that shows that. And then on the other side, it's like, no, you know, we've got the president and we need to get these answers. So you're not going to be able to remove politics from it. But what we can do is move forward. And as Trey Gowdy had said earlier, he doesn't care who comes to the meeting as long as they come with an open mind and keep their mouths shut.
Are you anticipating that Democrats can help this process too in terms of whatever they may know?
Sure, and I think that we would want that. We want to put the country first. We want our justice system to be just. We want our investigative arms like the FBI to be looking out for the best interests of the American people. We all want that, no matter which side of the aisle that we're on.
Right. Congressman Steve Russell of Oklahoma, great to have you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Harris.
President Trump is calling off the North Korea summit. We know that after some tough talk from the Kim Jong-un regime. We're learning more. We have a live report from South Korea on reaction there to the breaking story today. Also, General Jack Keane will join me with the president's strong warning to the North not to test America's military. What is next? Stay close.
North Korea has the opportunity to end decades of poverty and oppression by following the path of denuclearization and joining the community of Kim Jong-un chooses to engage in constructive dialogue and actions. I am waiting. In the meantime, our very strong sanctions, by far the strongest sanctions ever imposed, and maximum pressure campaign will continue.
The president there still holding the door open for North Korea after canceling next month's summit with Kim Jong-un. Reaction coming in from around the globe and around the United States. The UN Secretary General saying, quote, he's deeply concerned. And the Associated Press reporting the South Korean government is trying to figure out President Trump's intentions in canceling the sit-down. Senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott joins us now from Seoul. Greg?
Harris, it is late here in Seoul, but since we last spoke, we've gotten some definitive words from South Korean President Moon Jae-in. He was meeting in special emergency session with his national security staff, and he says, and I quote, denuclearization cannot be delayed, cannot be abandoned. He is urging direct talks between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. He seemed to be a bit blindsided by the events of the last couple hours. He said he was perplexed in that meeting. He said it was regrettable. He suggested perhaps another method of communications should be chosen between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Now, President Trump said that he spoke by phone also to the South Korean president. And when the president spoke, he said of military readiness in the region for whatever reason. That has got to be a concern for the South Korean president. He has been working hard in the last couple of months to come up with a diplomatic resolution to this crisis, culminating for him, remember, in that summit with Kim Jong-un on April 27th along DMZ. This has always, Harris, been a very careful process. The White House break-off today seems to stem from a statement coming from Pyongyang, Kim Jong-un's vice foreign minister calling Vice President Pence a political dummy when he referred to the so-called Libya model as an option in North Korea. Pyongyang has always seen that as a code word for regime change. Also getting the White House's ire. Apparently that reference in that statement today, again from Pyongyang, that a nuclear-to-nuclear showdown might happen if the two sides can't meet in the meeting room. We also understand that President Trump spoke with Japanese Prime Minister President Abe, another strong ally in the region. Ironically, Harris, this was supposed to be a day when this whole region moved just a little bit closer to peace. North Korea claims that on Thursday it completely dismantled its nuclear test site in the northeastern part of the country. He said it was an effort to gain peace and stability. Now, while foreign reporters were at the scene, there were no international inspectors there, so we have no confirmation of these claims. But in fact, this was more or less seen as a PR stunt, a measure of goodwill. Maybe there's some buyer's remorse now. Back to you, Harris.
All right, Greg Palcott, thank you very much. Meanwhile, the president is warning North Korea that America's military might is more than ready for whatever happens next.
No matter what happens and what we do, we will never, ever compromise the safety and security of the United States of America. I want to make that statement. Feel very, very strongly about it. Our military, as you know, has been greatly enhanced. Will soon be at a level that it's never been before.
Retired four-star General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst, on deck now. Great to see you. You were recently in the region, and you heard Greg Palcott, General, talking about the president and Japanese President Abe speaking. You've been observing something. Per the Japanese, what is it about South Korea, in fact?
Yeah, well, they're very concerned about South Korea because they kind of think they're in the orbit of China quite a bit more than most people recognize. And also, no one wanted to have this summit more than the South Koreans. And I think they worked pretty hard with Kim Jong-un on it, and they think they also lobbied the president on it. And what the Japanese have been very concerned about is that they would be decoupled. In other words, if there was denuclearization and they brought some of the missiles down, they wouldn't take them all down, and they would leave missiles that could still be in range of Japan. That was the concern they had. But Abe and the president, I think they've spoken, when I was there, they told me that Abe and the president had spoken 22 times up to that point.
That's a lot.
So that's the closest relationship of two heads of states in the world today.
That's interesting. What do you make of North Korea pulling back? You know, it was basically radio silence. The White House has been saying that, you know, we just hadn't heard from them anymore. And they wanted this summit. They asked us to do this. They asked our president to do this.
Well, there's a certain bizarre aspect to it, to be sure. But from the Korean Olympics, some 90 days ago, just up until what the president references as Kim Jong-un's second visit to China, the North Korean leader has been racing towards one concession after another with the objective to meet with the president someplace in the world, and advertising all along the way for those 90 days that I want to denuclearize. And the Chinese said the same thing. After the second visit, everything changed. He came back from that visit. He shut down communications with South Korea.
What do you think China offered them? Would we ever know?
I don't know what's taken place between China and North Korea, and I don't think we know either. I do know this. The president's doing absolutely the right thing, because two things have happened here just in the last few days.
Okay.
One is they're not following up on the meetings that are necessary between the United States and North Korea, even to have a meeting, just to deal with the logistics of it. Second, it's becoming obvious to our administration that they're not going to come in and put denuclearization on the table. And if that's the case, then they're wasting the president's time.
General, let's get to the military here. They're also threatening us. I mean, what can they do, and what will we do?
Well, they'll threaten us with words, to be sure, but they're not going to do anything that would provoke a military response from us, particularly during this period that we're going through right now. I do think there is something on Kim Jong-un's favor here. If he doesn't go back to testing, in other words, no nuclear testing, holds on to ballistic testing, the pressure on the sanctions will ease up a little bit, even though the United States will try to keep that pressure on. We already know China has pulled back a little bit already. If weeks go by and months go by and there's no testing, therefore no alarm bells going off, some of the other countries that we've always had enforcement problems with in terms of the sanctions will probably start to back off a little bit. It's going to be a test for the administration to stay on top of it.
Would we move in with the military is the question.
They will only move in with the military when the national security team is assured that he's got a weaponized nuclear ICBM, and he's capable of using that. And before we do that, we're going to start pulling our dependents out of South Korea. We'll be moving more military into the region.
It'll be obvious.
Yes.
All right. General Jack Keane, great to have you. Justice Department officials are gearing up for their second meeting of the day with congressional leaders on a confidential FBI informant who met with Trump campaign officials before the election. Because it's coming up. A second meeting now between top Justice Department officials and congressional leaders set to kick off at any moment on Capitol Hill. Back-to-back meetings today to brief top lawmakers on the confidential role of an FBI informant who met with Trump campaign officials before the 2016 election. The bipartisan group of lawmakers known as the Gang of Eight now gearing up for their chance to review the information. Power panel now. Pulitzer Prize winning investigative journalist Judy Miller. Wall Street Journal editorial page assistant editor James Freeman, both Fox News contributors and journalists alike. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks.
I mentioned that politics goes into everything. Actually, though, this should be relatively neutral. If you've got an informant talking with a campaign, Judy?
Absolutely. I think both sides at this point, and it's unfortunate, Harris, that we are speaking of both sides. Republicans and Democrats need to know what happened. We all need to know what happened. Is this person an informant? Is it a spy, as the president says? I think that we've become so partisan that we can't even ask the question without being accused of bad faith. And that's why I'm depressed about everything that I've heard in the past 48 hours.
A good sign, though, James, that these meetings are now bipartisan. And look, the Republicans had said yesterday before that happened, Democrats didn't request the information. You know, maybe they were numb to the fact that it needed to be gathered, and now a bipartisan sit down. Two of them.
Yeah, I'm not requesting the information. That's consistent with Mr. Schiff, who is going to be at this meeting. He basically has not wanted public disclosure or even disclosure to the committee, many of the facts here. But I think there is a great interest among all Americans in finding out what happened. So this informant, who tasked this informant with approaching the campaign? Who knew about that assignment? Were there other informants? Now, Andrew McCarthy has pointed out, when you go to the judge to get a FISA warrant, you probably are going to have to show all of the ways you tried to learn information without going that route. So when did this begin? Who authorized it? And how extensive was it?
Judy, I see your eyebrows lifting. What's
well,
going
exactly.
on?
I mean, there are so many questions that we don't know about this whole affair, including it's apparent that there were several attempts made to get a FISA warrant, surveillance warrant, before one was finally granted. What was so insufficient about the request before? It's very unusual for FISA warrants not to be granted. We need to know when this investigation began. Who started it? Who authorized it? Who knew about it? The very basic questions that need to be asked have not yet been answered. And I, for one, am withholding judgment until I get some more facts.
Those are great questions. And then here's another one. Do you think things will leak? Because, you know, the Democrats have accused the Republicans of not being able to keep this information tight. They're worried about the health of the informant and the health of the process of putting them in place.
Hoping not just for leaks, but for complete disclosure to the public. So it was a Republican meeting. Now it's a bipartisan meeting. Let's have a bipartisan meeting with the whole country and let everyone know what happened here. I think this is so much bigger than particular methods of the FBI. We need to know when our government set out to spy on a rival political campaign, what triggered that?
Well, we don't know if that's the case.
We got to run to the next commercial,
we
but
just
I'm going to keep you right here. Reaction to the president's decision to cancel the summit with Kim Jong-un.
Well, summit in question is a summit no more. President Trump canceling his face-to-face with North Korea's leader, but leaving the option open for future talks. We are live at the White House, the Korean Peninsula, and the Pentagon. Plus, the FDA commissioner joins me to explain how the government is working to lower the cost of prescription drugs despite opposition from some major companies. We'll see you at the top of the hour.
And we are awaiting reaction from North Korea to President Trump's decision to cancel his summit with Kim Jong-un. This is the South says it's trying to figure out what exactly the president's intention is. Power panel back now. Judith Miller, James Freeman. Your thoughts on South Korea just yesterday said 99% chance that this is still going to happen. The South Korean president met with our president this week.
Yeah, so the current president in South Korea, he wants a deal. He wants to get along. He's a lover, not a fighter, in terms of his approach to North Korea.
Is that what we know about him, Moon Jae-in? Okay.
And so this has been one of the difficult calculations for our president as he tries to take a harder line with North Korea. But I think this is good news that probably weren't going to get anything good out of it. And so the president's saying, why should I go?
I have to bring up something that got kind of nasty today. Nancy Pelosi, leader of the Democrats in the House, coming out and saying, oh, well, what just happened is going to make North Korea's dictator, giggle. It's going to give him a giggle fit. This was a Valentine, the letter that the president wrote after, saying thank you for the hostages and more.
No, I think that what it's going to give Kim Jong-un is a fit, not a giggle fit, because this game that he's been playing, pushing our president to see how far he can go, pushing us to see whether or not we would come to the table, even if denuclearization was not on it. I think that basically the president just put down a line and said, enough games, even though President Moon was just here, so this is a bit of an embarrassment for South Korea. Even though a great deal was at stake for the president, I think he did make the right decision in being very, very clear about the circumstances under which a summit would be held. And for Nancy Pelosi to make this a political issue as opposed to a U.S. interest issue, I think is a mistake.
Interesting. Do you think it will be costly come midterms for her party? Who knows, right?
She has a lot of problems.
Let's talk about General Jack Keane was just here, and he said, yeah, in meeting with Japanese officials, the concern is going to be just how cozy South Korea now gets with China, and there is strong concern about that. South Korea. James.
Yeah, absolutely. China wants to dominate the region. This is why I think a lot of us have been skeptical all along that, whether you look at North Korea as China's sock puppet or you think they're an independent actor, there doesn't seem to be a huge interest on China's part to rein them in or to get rid of the Kim regime. But, a lot of people talk about how the president can be kind of crude and rude. I think we ought to give him credit today for his language that he used with Kim. In the letter, he says, your nuclear capabilities are not as massive and powerful as ours. Sorry.
James and Judy, I'll bring you back.